here. You'd be amazed. They said that was their specific mission, and many of them lived on the craft. They never went back to the original planet. Some of them had their families on board these crafts, and they just went throughout the galaxies doing this work. It was their assignment. But I've had other people go back to lifetimes on other planets where they were living lives, they were working in laboratories. They came from everywhere. And in my work, I have found, hundreds of different types of ETs. They're not just a few. And they all have different jobs.
All right, Delores, you stay with us. We're going to take this quick break. Delores' website, by the way, and let me spell it for you because it's ozarkmt.com, but it's spelled OZARKMT.com. We'll be back in a moment. And her belief of this does not negate a divine creator. We'll talk with her about that when we come right back. Because you said this was controversial, and it is for some who are staunch believers in the Bible and very religious, I have not heard you say anything about not believing in a divine creator here. Somebody had to create the cedars and those that came around and did what they did throughout these various planetary systems, I assume, right?
Yes, and we have a very strong belief in God because in my work, we have had people go back to the source when they were created. This is what they call it, the source, what we call God. Now, to accept everything I'm saying, you have to also understand about reincarnation, and, those are also controversial beliefs. But I've had many people go back to the beginning when they were created. And this is also in my books, their description of what God is and where we all came from. And so the ETs also came from God. See, that's what we don't understand. You just don't live a body as a human. This is only one school that you go to, and that's all it is, a school. You learn lessons. You've also had lives as ETs, if you want to call them that, aliens on other planets and other dimensions. And I've had some go back to where they've gone past ETs to where they were beings of light. So anything is possible. But all of this they all came from God because we are, the real you is your soul, your spirit. Sure. That is the part that was created by God.
We'll get into these various waves in a moment, but you had mentioned earlier these that all this started, the new ones, the ones who've been coming here of late. It's been the last 50 years. So there's a reason for that, isn't there?
Yeah, we got plenty of time, so I guess I can build up to that. Is that okay?
All right.
All right, but one thing about God, the ETs, if you want to call them that, are closer to God than we will ever be because they don't eat. That's one of the things. Their organs have atrophied. They don't have to consume food anymore. These are certain types. And I asked them what they live on. They said they live on light. And I said, where does the light come from? It comes from the source. So without God, they couldn't live. It's absorbed through their body, and this is what keeps them alive.
Are they physical?
Some of them are. They're very physical. Their organs have atrophied, so they don't function like we do. Some people say they may be even us in the future, which is a possibility also.
Well, that is true, too.
So there's all kinds of theories, but what they have said is in the very, very beginning, they started the seedings because God, the source, told them to do it, to go out and begin to populate the world. So they're doing it under instructions. So you can say it's a creationist theory and the evolutionist theory combined into one. So neither one stands alone. It is a combination of the two.
Were some of these giants as reported in the Bible?
Definitely. Now, everything in the Bible is true to a certain extent. The part there about the first Jehovah and the ET, that part, that is what Zechariah Sitchin came up with. Those are the ones that came much, much later after the planet was formed. There were life, there was beings here, and they're the ones that wanted to use it for the wrong reasons. So that's the beginning of the Old Testament, are those creatures that Zechariah writes about. But there were definitely giants, In the beginning, there were some people that had blue skin, green skin, purple skin. They were all different experiments, and some of them survived and some of them died out. But when they began, some of the animals did develop on Earth genetically, and other ones were brought in. But they had to find an animal that they could develop into an intelligent being. This took eons of time, but they finally decided that the monkey was the best one. Here again, this may upset people, but they had to have an animal that had hands so they could make tools later, and also have a large brain capacity. So they took the monkey and they genetically modified it to become a human being. And they've told me the missing link will never be found because it jumped generations and species so fast from what they began with until what eventually became Homo sapiens. I asked them one time, I said, didn't life ever occur just spontaneously and indigenously on any planet? They said no, because if they did, it would have been chaotic. It would not have had a plan. They said for you to develop into an intelligent human being, if it had happened spontaneously, it would have taken 1 million more years than it did to have an intelligent being on this planet. So it had to be planned and studied very carefully for what was developing. So let's get up and jump to, okay, I know a little more to tell before we get up to 1950. In the beginning, they said, let's give this beautiful planet a creature with free will and see what he does with it. And believe me, they're not very happy with what we're doing with it.
It was their choice.
Yes, just to see what they would do with it. And we were supposed to be a perfect species that would never get sick and never die. It was like in a virtual Garden of Eden was what it was supposed to be like. And everything was developing along and going very well until something happened to spoil the experiment. A meteorite hit the Earth. And when it did, it brought a bacteria that was was alien to the Earth. And the bacteria, for the first time, developed disease to the Earth, and it contaminated the growing species. And at first there was a lot of sorrow and sadness. They said, what do we do now? They went back to the councils, and there are councils over solar systems, galaxies. They're the ones that set the rules. They went back to the council and they said, what are we going to do now? Our experiment is ruined. Do we just destroy everything and start over again, or do we let it continue developing on its own? It was decided that so much time and effort had been put into it to allow it to continue to develop.
And monitor it maybe every once in a while.
And this will help people understand what the ETs have been doing up into our modern time. It's not invasive. It's not negative. They've been keeping track of us and watching us because we're their children. And they said the human species is so important, it must not perish. So the idea that they're here to take over the world doesn't fit into this at all. It's just misunderstandings of people. But along the way, as the species began to develop, it needed different inventions along the way, different things to help the species go, like the invention of fire, the being taught how to plant. Now, every culture in the world has the legend of the culture bringer. They always have someone, the corn woman with the Indians, someone who brings agriculture, someone who brings fire.
Some kind of knowledge.
And they always come in the legends from the sky or from across the waters.
That's true.
These are the ones who came to teach the developing species, and they lived among them, and because they could live as long as they wanted, they were treated as gods, and these are the legends of the gods that have come down through us through all the cultures, where the ETs living among them, teaching them the different things. And I asked them, well, oh yes, the Star Trek